Hey everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you're new to my channel, my name is Melissa and I'm a registered nurse. So I want to start off this video by wishing everybody a very happy Thanksgiving. It is my personal favorite holiday. One, because it's close to my birthday, and two, because I just love being surrounded by friends and family and I love eating good food. So if you live in the States and if you celebrate, I am wishing you and your loved ones a very happy Thanksgiving. And then second, before I get started with today's video, I do want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of today's video. Today's video is made in partnership with my favorite jewelry brand, Luisa. They were kind enough to send me 2 new pieces of jewelry. I absolutely love Luisa because not only are they affordable and their pieces are elegant and timeless, but they are also completely carbon neutral from their packaging to their jewelry. So they were kind enough to send me 2 new pieces of jewelry, which I'm wearing today. One is this gorgeous gold necklace. I love it because it's just elegant, it's timeless, I can wear it for any occasion. I'm actually going out to dinner tonight and it is perfect for me to wear. And then they also sent me this pair of gorgeous gold earrings. They're kind of like a chain link. So they're very modern, but at the same time, very classy, very understated, and very timeless. So if you would like to pick up some pieces of jewelry from Luisa, especially as a gift because the holidays are literally right around the corner, you can go ahead and check out the link in my description box to shop at Luisa. And I also put a discount code there so that you can get a percentage off of your purchase. Okay, so now to get into the topic of today's video, which is talking about my experience so far being a new grad nurse in the ICU and talking about my nurse residency program. For those of you guys that don't know or have not seen my previous videos, I've been a registered nurse for 5 months, so I'm a baby nurse. I'm brand new, and I started my first nursing job back in August, so it's officially been 3 months. I work at a hospital, local hospital. I live in the DC metropolitan area, so it's just a local community hospital near my house. And I joined a nurse residency program and I'm in critical care. So I'm an ICU nurse and my nurse residency program is 1 year. So now I'm 3 months into my program. So I'm officially 1/4 of the way done with my nurse residency program. And so I think the last time that I sat and updated you guys on my new job, I think I was still in the PCU. So I'm gonna give you guys like a quick background. So when I started my current job as an ICU nurse through the nurse residency program, I did not start my first day on the unit. I actually was in a classroom setting for 1.5 to 2 weeks. So the very first day of work, I had a general orientation just with HR, talking about the organization that I'm working for and the hospital that I'm working for. And then day 2 was a nurse orientation. So it was an orientation talking about what nurses need to do to stay in compliance at the hospital and different policies that nurses need to follow and stuff like that, and scheduling. And then day 3 of my new job, my current job, was a nurse residency orientation, because the nurse orientation was for all nurses starting at the hospital, including experienced nurses. And so the nurse residency orientation was specific to brand new nurses starting through the nurse residency program. So at least at my hospital, 2 of the main criterias for entering into the nurse residency program are, 1, I believe it's that you need to have gotten your license within 6 months, and 2, you could not have worked any other professional nursing jobs. So for the nurse residency program, they really want brand new nurses that have absolutely 0 experience. So after that orientation, then we had a day where we did skills. So we came in scrubs and we learned how to, or we reviewed how to put in an IV, what to do when a patient codes in the hospital, so goes into cardiac arrest, how to put on EKG leads and stuff like that. We had a whole full day of skills. We learned how to clean central line dressings and everything, which was really cool. And so we were in classroom settings for a while, and then when I finally hit the unit, I didn't actually go to the ICU. Once I scrubbed up and clocked in and went to the hospital, the ICU nurses in my nurse residency program did not go to the ICU. We actually started in something called the PCU, which is the progressive care unit. And so for those of y'all that don't know, the progressive care unit is basically it's still critical care, but it's kind of for patients that are not, like patients that are too critical and too sick to be on like a general med surg unit, but they're not quite sick enough to be in the ICU. So it's very common for ICU patients, once they become a little bit more stable and they get downgraded, they'll often get downgraded to PCU for a while before they go home or before they go farther down to med surg. And so if I remember correctly, I think that was where I left off the last time that I like sat and talked to you guys about like my new job. I think I was like finishing up on the PCU because I spent 2 weeks working there, and it was really, I think, just to like dip my feet in the water. I think that was the purpose of the ICU nurses going to the PCU, so we can kind of start getting used to caring for critically ill patients. We could get used to the software that my hospital uses. My hospital uses Cerner, by the way. But I think it was just to get us used to like coming in, clocking in, taking care of critical care patients, charting, pulling medications from the Pyxis, administering medications, etc., before we went up to the ICU with a higher acuity or sicker patients. And so I felt very confident when I left the PCU. So after spending 2 weeks on the PCU, I kind of started to know where everything was in the supply closet. I started getting more comfortable with like charting, pulling medications out of the Pyxis, starting like IV drips. So not starting an IV, but like starting the drips in the Alaris pumps and like working the Alaris pumps and all that stuff. So I felt like, okay, I'm comfortable, I'm ready for the ICU. The transition for me from the PCU to the ICU was very, very difficult. It was a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. To be completely transparent, I think I cried every day. I'm laughing, it's not funny. I think I cried every day my first week in the ICU because it was just such a hard adjustment for me. When I was in the PCU, it was me and I think 4 or 5 other nurse residents, because we went in a group. So in my nurse residency program, I believe that there are like 40 people at my hospital, and like 40 nurse residents in my hospital. I think in the entire residency program, because the residency program spans across the organization, so there are 3 hospitals that it covers. So in my hospital alone, I believe there are like 40 new nurses in the residency program, and all 40 of us were kind of dispersed into different areas. So I'm an ICU nurse. Some of the nurses in the nurse residency program went to like obstetrics, so they're either in labor and delivery or postpartum, or they're in the NICU. Some went to med surg, some went to the ER. So in my critical care group, there were only like 5 of us, including myself. And so when we were in the PCU, we were all kind of together. We had one preceptor that we shared. So it was like one experienced nurse training us new nurses. When I went to the ICU, I got my own preceptor. So it became 1-to-1. So I was working different days than the other new ICU nurses, and I wasn't seeing them as much, so there was not as much of a community. So I think that was difficult because I got used to the nurses, and I got used to being like a group and having that solidarity. So it was definitely more independent once I got to the ICU. That was one thing. 2, even things as simple as like knowing where everything was. Like I thought the supply closet and the layout of the PCU where I started and the ICU were going to be similar. Completely different. So I got up to the ICU, I didn't know where anything was. And even though that sounds simple, it can be very difficult when someone is like in an emergency and they're telling you, go get me this supply from the supply room. And I run to the supply room and I'm standing there for like 10 minutes trying to find it. And then when I come back, it's kind of like, where were you? What took you so long? Like everything in the ICU is pretty quick. It's definitely very fast paced. Another thing was just the tone of the unit was different. So like in the PCU, again, I spent 2 weeks there. So I was kind of starting to get used to the tone of the unit. I started getting used to the staff on the unit, people's personalities, and started getting comfortable. When I went to the ICU, patients in the ICU are sicker. The tone of the unit is a lot more serious. There's not as much joking around. There's not as much like chit chat and talking about life. Pretty much like, at least for me, like 90% of the conversations that I have with other staff members are talking about patients and patient care, which is nice, but it's definitely an adjustment for me, somebody who comes from administration. I'm used to, like, you know, going into the office with my coffee, talking about like my weekend and my coworkers' weekend, and just like really having that personal connection and having like time to talk about life before starting work. Obviously, if you're in direct patient care, the tone is different. If you're in the ICU where things are very serious, it's just the second I clock in, it's like, okay, time to start taking care of patients and time to start working. Everyone's very serious. And so that was an adjustment. There were a lot of adjustments. The very first preceptor that I had, we didn't really click, which she was an amazing nurse. I think she was a great teacher, but it just, you know, for personal reasons, I think we just didn't click. That was also very difficult for me because, you know, I was wondering, am I the problem? Is like, what's going on here? I just didn't know what the issue was. I thought I was gonna have a preceptor, and I guess in my mind, in my perfect world, we were gonna be like this, and they were gonna be like a mentor to me, or like a big sister or big brother. And at least with the very first preceptor that I had, that first week, that did not happen. And so that was also added stress and added anxiety. So I think that there were just a lot of things that just contributed to the transition being very hard. My very first day on the ICU was very difficult. There was an emergent situation and I didn't act fast enough because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And so the backlash that I got for that was really challenging for me because I was just kind of like, this is my first day, I don't know what's going on. So it was a lot. I feel like, I don't know, the transition for me was just a lot harder than I thought that it would be. And at least the very first week that I was in the ICU, it was really tough. So I've been in the ICU now for at least 2 months, and things have definitely gotten easier, but that initial transition was just hard. But where I'm at right now, to be completely transparent, my last shift was 2 days ago. It didn't go well, I'll be completely honest. Before my last shift, I definitely would say that I was like feeling super confident, very happy with where I was at. Now I still am happy with where I'm at. I feel like I'm in the right place. Definitely feel like I chose the right hospital. But it has put a little bit of like self-doubt in me. So that's definitely something that I'm working through right now. But before my last shift, so if I filmed this last week, I feel like my tone would be a lot different. But every day is just kind of different. The ICU, I think, is a really hard place to start out. I was told that when I was in nursing school, and if anything, that made me want to go to the ICU more, because that's just my personality. And I was just kind of like, if you're trying to steer me away from the ICU, that's where I want to be. But now that I'm starting out, I can say I think it's really hard to start off as a new nurse, having to learn all of the hospital policies, having to learn all of the unit policies, having to learn how to chart properly in Cerner, how to take care of patients, how to talk to patients and families, starting at a new hospital on a new unit, even as simple as like charting appropriately, you have to learn how to do that. All of that is stuff that you're going to have to go through if you are a new nurse starting off your career in the hospital anyway. And then on top of all of that, plus hospital policies and staying in compliance with stuff, if you're starting off in the ICU like I am, you also have to learn how to do things that are not done on other units, like titrating certain IV drips. That's not done on other units in the hospital. That's something that's very specific to the ICU, at least in my hospital. And those are things that I have to learn. Different medications that I didn't really learn about in school because they're specific to the ICU. In my opinion, like nursing school, at least my nursing program, really just taught us how to pass the NCLEX. And it taught us kind of like general nursing if we were going into med surg, but it wasn't super specialized, which is fair because most nurses are not starting off in the ICU. Most nurses are starting off in a more generalized form of nursing. So even though they touch on critical care in nursing school, or they'll touch on things like labor and delivery, the bulk of nursing school really is more generalized. So if you go into a highly specialized area of nursing, like me, critical care. For some other nurses, it would be labor and delivery. Those, you have extra learning that you have to do. But to end this segment on it's not a happier note. I don't know. I don't want to just end it on like a sad cliffhanger. But I think to wrap up my thoughts on the unit and my unit, like I said, everyone's been nice and friendly. Everyone's been helpful. There has been no bullying or anything like that. I'm so glad about that. So when I go in the morning, that's one less thing that I have to worry about. I definitely have a lot of worries that have to do with like patient care, me messing up, stuff like that. But at least I don't have to worry about the work environment because the staff is nice. So that is a blessing. But I will say, someone once told me, whenever you start a new job, pretty much most new jobs, there's some exceptions, but most new jobs are just going to be a hard transition if you're like, especially if you're switching organizations, especially if you're switching careers. And so someone once told me, give it at least 6 months before you decide whether or not you like it. And so that's definitely what I'm doing with this job. When it comes to nursing, not for a split second have I regretted going back and changing my career. I will never regret that because of the flexibility, because of the pay, because of this, because of everything, because of me getting purpose with what I do. I'm so happy that I'm a nurse. When it comes to me working in the ICU, like I said, it's been a hard transition. And so the advice that I was always given was give yourself 6 months to decide whether or not you actually like a job. And so I'm gonna do that. But I think in this case, because it's nursing, which is different than a lot of other professions, because it's critical care, which is highly specialized, I wanna give myself a full year before I decide how I feel about it. Because some days I come home from work and I'm like, yes, this is where I'm supposed to be. I love this. And to be completely honest, other days I feel like, I'm not smart enough to be here. I feel like I'm not smart enough. I'm not thinking critically enough. So for me, it literally has been like day by day, week by week, shift by shift. So I've decided I want to give myself until I'm done with the nurse residency program. So at the end of a year, to see how I really feel about the ICU. And even after, if to be honest, if I get to 1 year and, I've given it a shot and I decide I don't like it, I'll probably still give it another year if I can handle it to see if it gets better. So really I'm giving myself at least 2 years, but I'm giving in this specialty of nursing, but I'm giving myself at least a year to decide definitively if I like it and if this is where I'm supposed to be right now. The topic that I wrote down was about losing my first patient. So now that I am actually a nurse working on the ICU, I have had a couple of patients of my own pass away. And I think the very first patient that I had that passed away was difficult. It was a lot more difficult than when I was a nursing student because this was actually my patient and I was actually taking care of them. And then I don't want to get too specific because of HIPAA. And even if I'm not naming the patient, I don't want to talk too much about this specific situation just out of respect for that patient, even though they're no longer here. But it was a situation where it's one of my biggest fears in life. And that was what I had to deal with. So it was expected. Thank God it wasn't like it was unexpected. Thank God, by the grace of God, I was gonna knock on wood. But so far I have not lost a patient and it was completely unexpected. And so it has not been a shock, but it's still hard. I think losing someone, I've been learning how to be caring while detaching myself from the situation, detaching myself enough where I'm not bringing it home with me, where it doesn't disturb me. It definitely helps that I have a therapist. I think that journaling helps. Just doing journaling, exercising, doing things to take your mind off of it helps. But the very first patient that I lost, it did sit with me for a couple of days just because of the situation, and the situation around it is like one of my biggest fears in life. And so I had a lot of empathy for the patient. I had a lot of empathy for their just life and their life situation. And it was a little bit harder for me to detach myself. But it's definitely a part of critical care. I mean, it's a part of nursing in general, but I think there's certain specialties in the hospital where it's, I think, more rare to lose a patient versus the ICU. I feel like that is a unit where there is a lot of loss. And so I'm coming to terms with that. In some cases, I'm learning that sometimes it can be a blessing. If someone is in a lot of pain, they're not going to get better. They've been struggling with something for a long time. Sometimes it can be a blessing that they're no longer suffering. And so that's how I look at it for those situations. It's definitely harder when it's like a young person and it feels like they have a lot of life to live left. But I'm just learning like how to detach myself from it. And so I think if you're watching this, if you're interested in critical care, if that's not something you think that you're able to do, like detach yourself enough where you don't take it home with you and it doesn't affect you too much, that's definitely something to think about, like whether or not you want to go into this area of nursing. Because, you know, death is a part of life, death is a part of healthcare, and in this particular specialty, it's definitely more common than if you are like on another unit. Okay, next I wrote down modules and education because this is something that I genuinely did not think about when, it's funny. So they're like, I have these online modules that I have to do. If you're, I guess, in healthcare, then you know, it's like online learning. Oh, I guess anyone in nursing school, you know, like the EDAPs, the modules that we have to do online, you have to do that once you are a nurse. So the homework does not stop once you're done with nursing school. And I knew that in theory, especially since my background is healthcare administration. So it's funny, I've worked at previous jobs where I have like helped create education and helped create like a standard for education and modules that people need to complete for the nurses. And so now I'm on the other end of it where I'm actually having to do this stuff. And it's a lot. Like on my days off, I have education modules that I have to do. At first it was cute because I was just excited. Like even on my days off, I was still thinking about like being a nurse and I was like, I want to learn as much as I can. I still do. But like when I first started, even on my days off, I would spend like 4 hours a day, or in some cases I'd spend the entire day doing these online modules, and it was exciting and I was learning so much information. And now I'm at a point where when I'm off of work, I like to just be off of work. And so it has been a bit challenging to be keeping up with all of the online modules that I have to do and all the like homework that I have to do for my nurse residency program. It's obviously not as bad as nursing school because it's not as much, but there's some days where I'm just like, damn, today's my day off. I don't feel like doing anything work related, but it would be a good use of my time to do these online modules. And I'm not a huge fan of it, but I understand why it's important. And then in addition to that, in the nurse residency program, we do have classes that we have to take. So I mentioned this before earlier in the video where like the ICU nurses and nurses in certain specialties have more classes than other people in the nurse residency program, like other specialties or other areas of care, but we all have classes that we have to take. So we all had to take CPR class and become CPR certified before we started working, but critical care nurses, so ICU, progressive care, I believe the emergency department, and I think potentially labor and delivery, like NICU, had to do something called ACLS, which is advanced cardiac life support. So it's like a step above like CPR and BLS. BLS is basic life support. So ACLS is a more advanced version. So I had to sit in, I think it was like a 2-day, 8-hour class, so 16 hours total. I had to go to that class. I've gone to respiratory class, like learning about like different ventilation settings for my patients that are ventilated or trached. I haven't done it yet, but CCRT, which is continuous renal replacement therapy. So it's an intense and continuous form of dialysis. I've had patients that are on CRRT already. So I've read up about it and I've learned how to take care of patients, but there's a class that I actually have to go to and take. On my unit all the time, there are like different educational sessions that are like 10 to 15 minutes. So while you're working, you go to the nurse's station and you learn how to use different pieces of equipment. So there's a lot of education and it is fun. My hospital is great with resources. So they have like all these online resources where some of the doctors have performed lectures. And so you can go online and you can watch recorded lectures On one of my days off, I watched a lecture when I very first started on vasopressors. So it's medications that press on your veins to make your blood pressure increase when they're low. And so that was something I didn't really learn too much about in nursing school. They touched on it, but they're very specific. Like there are like 5 very specific vasopressors that we use in my ICU. And so one of the physicians on the unit was nice enough. Well, I don't know if nice enough if that was just in her job description, but she's actually a really amazing lecturer. And so there was a recorded lecture of her talking about the different vasopressors, how to use them, how to titrate them. And so on my day off, I watched that a couple times and I took notes and I really enjoyed it. So I do enjoy the educational sessions, but there's just a lot. It's a lot of learning. It's a lot to stay on top of. And sometimes it can be hard to get off of like a difficult shift. Maybe you have like 2 or 3 days off and I'm just like, I just want to like disconnect, but then you have to do these modules. So it's been challenging, but I've been like just trying to stay on top of it. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about the pay. And some of y'all probably just don't even care about anything else in this video. You only care about the pay. To be completely honest, I've thought about making one of those paid transparency videos where I like will tell you guys how much I make like per paycheck and like break it down for you guys. Because like morally to my core, I do believe in paid transparency. I feel like it doesn't help anybody except for the employer or big corporations to hide your pay. Like I feel like we should all be talking about how much we're making because I feel like that helps to eliminate pay disparities. Like it's hard to underpay somebody if they know how much everybody else is making. But at the same time, I've heard of people getting in trouble for doing that. Like their employers finding that online and not liking it and they get in trouble, which I think is BS. But at the same time, I'm scared. So if you would like to see a video like that, then let me know and I'll think about it. But I've been on the fence and I'm leaning more towards not making that type of video. But I don't know. But I will say I am happy with the pay. I mean, I'll be transparent in this sense. At the start of this year, I was making about $48,000, which is, I mean, to some people that's a lot. To other people, it's nothing. For the area that I live in, it's not considered a lot. I live in the DC metropolitan area, so it's one of the most expensive areas in the country. And that was in January of this year. It's now November and I'm almost doubled my pay with my new job. Within just a few months, my pay has increased by about $30,000. So to me, I feel like nursing is it's a great career. It's not necessarily a career that you will get wealthy in, but it's definitely a career that is, in my opinion, sustainable if you are trying to support yourself or if you have kids and you're trying to support a family. I do think that nursing is a great career, and I can now say that from experience if you're trying to make some money to care for yourself. And then I will say, even though I'm not like rich or I'm not making 6 figures, for me around like I make over $75,000 now. And so that's my starting salary as a brand new nurse with no experience through a nurse residency program. So my pay is only going to go up in my career. I think after I'm at the hospital a year, my pay is going to increase by some percentage. I'm not sure. And then of course, if I get a promotion, if I go to another area of care, if I leave the bedside and do other things, like throughout my career, I'm only going to be making more money. And so for me, this is a second career. I'm 31 now. I love to say like I'm 30, I'm a new nurse. I'm now 31 because I just had my birthday. So for me, I'm 31. Making this amount of money, especially in my area, is nothing abnormal or spectacular. But a lot of the nurses in my residency program are younger than me. They're like 21, 22, fresh out of college. And in my opinion, to be 21, 22, fresh out of college, making $75,000 to $80,000 a year in this economy is rare. So to me, like, I don't know. I feel like I would be acting a fool if I was 21, 22 years old making that type of money. My first job out of college, my undergrad, when I was that age, I was making about $40,000. And at the time, I remember that was a lot of money. Like I would tell all my friends and my family that was my age, and they were like, how did you land a job making that much? And so people that are going into nursing as a profession and they're getting their license at a really young age, they're able to make a lot of money fresh out of school. And so by the time that they're my age, if you're watching this and you're young, this is advice for you. By the time you are 30 or 31, you will be making well over 6 figures, whether you decide to do travel nursing, whether you decide to go into administration, because your pay only goes up. So that's the starting salary for this career. In addition to me making like $30,000 more than I was making at the beginning of the year, I'm making more money and working less hours. So I was working, every other job I've had has been like an office job, a 9-to-5 job, or like, it's not even 9-to-5 anymore. It's like 8-to-5 or 9-to-6. But I was working at least 40 hours a week. Some jobs I've been at, like throughout nursing school, I was working like 50 hours a week because I was putting in overtime, but I wasn't getting paid for overtime. So now working as a nurse, I'm only working 36 hours a week. So I think I wrote down the math. So in 1 week as a nurse, I worked 36 hours. When I was at my previous jobs, I was working 40 hours. In 1 month working as a nurse, I work 12 days in a month. At every other job that I've had, I worked 20 days in a month. So every year, once you tally up an entire year as a nurse at the bedside, I only work 144 days. Working in an office environment where you're working Monday through Friday, you're working 240 days. And then that equates to 1 year working as a nurse at the bedside. I work 1,872 hours. And then working at like an office 9-to-5 job, Monday through Friday, you work 2,080 hours. So all of that to say, once you tally it up, I have a lot more free time and I work a lot less days and a lot less hours in a week and in a year working at the bedside, and I'm making more money. So I'm working less and making more, which to me, that's a no-brainer. So I'm happy with that. And then I did write down like some positives. With all of my extra free time, I have more time to work on my rental property. So if you haven't seen my previous videos, I do own a rental property in Maryland with my husband. Our goal is to own a couple of rental properties. Right now we only have one. And we own an old house. It's a townhouse. So even though people will say like owning a rental property is passive income, we do everything ourselves. My husband's a handyman, so he does all the maintenance work on the house. There's a lot of maintenance work that needs to be done because it's an old house. So we're able to save money there, but even though we're saving money, let's have time. And then all of the like maintenance tickets, all of the rental collection, all of the communications, all of the contracts that we have to do with different contractors and with our tenant, all of that I do. So I do the administrative stuff, he does the maintenance work. That actually takes up more time in a month than you would think. So some weeks we don't have to do anything with the house. And then other weeks I can spend like 15 to 20 hours working on stuff for the house. So I have, thank God, like in the last couple of months, it seems like the house is falling down. Things are quiet now. We had a bunch of like repairs and stuff to do. And it was just like a lot of like calling contractors, calling the bank, like just doing a lot of things. And a lot of those tasks really need to be done like Monday through Friday, like typical business hours. So in the past, I'd be working during those hours. So I would need to like take a day off to take care of these things, or I'd have to like take a long lunch break and like try to get a hold of people on my lunch hour. Now that I'm working in the hospital, I'm off during the week a lot of days. So I have time to be on hold. I have time to cuss people out. I have time to call different contractors. I have time to talk to my tenant. So the timing of it was perfect. So this last like month, I've spent a lot of time working on our rental property, and I would not have been able to do that. And I don't know what we would have done if I was working like a typical Monday through Friday job. And then, it gives me more time to work on YouTube, even though I haven't spent it. I've had a lot of things going on in my personal life, but for the future, I do have more time to not only film, but edit. I edit my own videos. So I have more time to work on YouTube. I wrote down do chores and chill. I have more time to clean the house. I have more energy to clean the house because I'm off more days. Cooking, cleaning, relaxing. I've started reading more. I've started doing puzzles and just kind of like enjoying my life more than I was able to when I was in nursing school. Oh, and then the last thing I wrote down, get a PRN job. So right now I'm still getting used to being a nurse. And so when I'm off, like, thank God we're not in a financial situation where I need to take on another job. So when I'm off, I like to just be off. But it is nice that with nursing, I can always take on like an additional job, like a part-time job or a PRN and as needed job. So now that I'm only working 36 hours a week, I can easily take on like a side hustle whenever I want to. It's nice to have that option. And so the one negative that I wrote about my new schedule is that I do work a lot of weekends, which some people don't care about that. For me, my whole adult life, I've been in office environments. So my whole adult life, I've worked full-time jobs where I'm in the office Monday through Friday and then I'm off on the weekends. And I think most adults have that schedule. Not everybody, but a lot do. And so whenever people are having parties or get-togethers and stuff like that, a lot of that is on Saturdays, Sundays. So I do have to miss some of that. Soon I'll start to make my own schedule. So I just have been letting my friends and family know, like, hey, give me like a month or 2 months notice if you're gonna have something, so I can, like, you know, not schedule myself on those days or request for those days off. So it's not ideal, but I did write down kids. So back to the positives of my schedule. My husband and I do want kids eventually someday in the future. But once we have kids, or for those of you guys that have kids, the flexibility of the schedule is completely unmatched. So, you know, even though I do work weekends, I have colleagues on my unit and throughout the hospital where they work mostly weekends and then they're off during the weekdays. So what that allows them to do is not have to pay for childcare. So on the weekends, they're in the hospital working while their partner is taking care of the kids. And then while their partner is working Monday through Friday, they're home with the kids and they spend like $2,000 to $3,000, or they save $2,000 to $3,000 a month on childcare. So my husband and I have talked about it, and that's probably the route that we would go, because I don't want to spend like a mortgage payment every month on someone taking care of my kid. So it is nice to have that option, and it's not directly related to my pay. But if that's saving a lot of money. Let me do the math. So childcare in my area, I think, is like $2,500 a month, like the median. So if you have one kid, that's like $30,000 a year that we would be able to save if we have a kid, if I make my schedule predominantly working on weekends and then being off weekdays. So to me, that's a luxury that you don't really get in most other career fields, where you have the flexibility of still like working full-time, getting full-time benefits, getting full-time pay, but then you're off enough days where you don't have to spend thousands of dollars on childcare. So to me, the pay and the flexibility of the schedule is probably my favorite part about nursing so far. And I can see how it's gonna like positively impact my family in the future. And the last thing that I wrote down are my nurse residency program sessions. So my nurse residency program sessions, the entire nurse residency program, so all of the new nurses and our mentors, we meet once a month and we talk about different topics. So there's like a theme of each meeting. I wrote down one of them. We've only had a couple so far. We've only had 3 because I'm on month 3. So we had a health and wellness / mindfulness session where we talked about ways to take care of ourselves out of work, like outside of work, both physically and mentally, because nursing is very taxing, especially when you're starting off as a new nurse. So we talked about like different ways to be mindful, going outside and exercising, making sure you're eating properly, getting enough sleep. We had our most recent session was on medication safety. So we had the director of pharmacy for our hospital come and talk to us about ways to protect ourselves as nurses. I see a lot of things on TikTok and online about nursing students being scared to become nurses because they can be liable to lawsuits, and if they make like one little medication error, they could get in trouble. And while that is, I mean, it can be true and there's always that liability, there are definitely safeguards that the hospitals will put in place to protect us from making mistakes. It makes it just that much harder to make a mistake. There are a lot of blocks for that to happen. So the director of pharmacy came and spoke to us for like an hour. He had a whole presentation. It was really cool. Just talking about ways that we can protect ourselves, the proper way to administer medications, and how we can reach out to the pharmacy team if we have questions, and how it's a whole collaborative effort. So we talked about all of that in the last session. And then we also have been having time towards the end of our sessions to kind of debrief. So we'll break into groups, like all of the new nurses, and we will kind of talk about the challenges that we've been facing within the last month on the unit and just in life. And this is my favorite part of the nurse residency program sessions, because especially that very first session, like after my first month as a nurse, I think it was like right after I started on my unit in the ICU, and I was just crying every day, and it was just a really hard transition. It was like after that first week, we had a session, and I think when you're struggling, it can feel like you're the only person struggling, or you could kind of look around and it seems like everybody else has stuff figured out. And so after that first session, I learned, at least the people in my immediate group that we were talking about our experiences, a lot of the other new nurses were feeling exactly the same way that I was feeling. And they were also wondering like, hey, like I didn't click with my preceptor. Is this normal? It's been a hard transition. It's been difficult. I've been feeling kind of like, am I in the right spot? And so talking to other people and hearing that these feelings are normal has been helpful for me. You know, I don't know if it's helpful for other people, but it's helpful for me because it makes me feel like, okay, this isn't abnormal. It's okay to feel this way, and just talking about it. So some people don't like the sessions. I like the sessions. I mean, it's not like school where you just go to these things and you're like, it's, in my opinion, I'm like, okay, you clock in, you're getting paid for this. So we're getting paid to learn about this profession. We're getting paid to learn about the hospital, which is beneficial and interesting. And then you're also getting paid to like talk about your feelings and get support. So I think my favorite part about the nurse residency program is the support of it all. Like I could not imagine starting off as a new nurse dealing with all of the stuff that I'm dealing with and not having that support. So like there are 40 other people in the hospital who are also new to the profession, they're new to the hospital, and they're kind of experiencing the same things that I'm experiencing. So for me, I like not feeling like I'm the only one. It really gives a sense of community. And so if you are watching this, if you're still watching this, it's probably a long video, and you are like in nursing school and you're looking at jobs, my biggest advice would be only start, if you're going to the hospital, only start a new job if they have a residency program. So only start off in the hospital through a residency program. I feel like it gives you additional support because it's not easy to become a nurse and to start off at the bedside. So those are all the topics that I have for this video. Overall, like I said, I'm very happy with the hospital that I chose. I think the work environment is really healthy. I did clinical rotations at hospitals that I saw bullying going on. They were bullying each other, they were bullying students. It was just toxic. And so I think the best thing about my hospital is that I haven't seen any of that, and that's just not the culture of the organization. And so that makes the transition into nursing easier to not have to deal with that nonsense. So, and then in addition to that, I think I mentioned this in a previous video, my hospital is a faith-based organization and I am a Christian. And so I feel like the hospital's like overall morals and policies and tones align with my personal beliefs. So that's also one other thing I don't have to worry about. In the past, I've worked for companies that were just unethical, and usually it happens at smaller companies. My hospital is not a small hospital, but I've worked at like a startup company and like small office environments where the morals of the people in charge didn't align with mine. And so staff, myself included, were kind of expected to do immoral things. And so I've been in situations where I'm expected to do something at work or to act a certain way that I personally just don't feel is appropriate. And so I don't have to deal with any of that at my hospital. So I'm very happy with the hospital and the organization that I chose. I'm still feeling out the ICU and whether or not it's the right place for me. But like I said, I'm giving it time. I'm giving it at least a year before I decide definitively if I like it or not. Where I'm at right now, some days I feel like I'm in the right place. When I have a hard shift, I'm not so sure. But overall, I'm very happy with the fact that I chose a hospital that has a nurse residency program. Because I do know one thing for sure. I think if I started off in the ICU without a nurse residency program and without all the support that it comes with, I don't think I would have lasted. I think, you know, I would have been one of those YouTubers where I would have been making a video talking about how I only lasted at my first job like 3 months. So right now, I will say it's hard, but I do feel supported and I feel like I have a support system. So that's also a really big blessing. And again, that's my biggest advice. If you are looking at new nursing jobs and you're about to take the NCLEX and you're looking for your first nursing job, do not go to a hospital unless they have a strong residency program, especially if you want to go into a specialized area of care like the emergency room or labor and delivery or the ICU. Like those areas I think are really hard to start off your career in, or they're harder to start off your career in because of how specialized they are. So I think the best thing you can do for yourself is find a nurse residency program that will give you a lot of support as you're starting off. I think that's probably the best thing that I've done for myself next to picking the right hospital. So if you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, please comment down below. And don't forget to shop Anna Luisa with my discount code. It is in my description box below. If you made it to the end of this video, congratulations, because it's probably long and I probably rambled and ranted. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate your support and I will see you in my next video.